Welcome back to the Retro Gamer Rewind with your host Moby, Leland, and myself, RGX. If you're a fan of the N64, today's show will be right up your alley.
Yeah, so I'm Moby, and time for the monologue here, as usual. And this month it is another positive monologue because I am here to talk about N64 Homebrew cartridges. So, as hopefully you guys know by now, and especially I'm sure Leland knows, I am a huge fan of the Nintendo 64. I've got a lot of old games for it, of course, a lot of the classics. But just in the past year or so, I've started buying some of the new Homebrew cartridges. I guess they're technically considered mods, but I tell you guys, they do such a good job with these things, at least the ones that I have, that it's honestly like a new game. Like, they may use certain character models, like for example, my newest game is this Mario game, Behind the Cursed Mirror, but like, there's all sorts of moves that Mario can do in this version of the game that he can't do in the original. He can climb up vines and shit. There's all sorts of new textures. The game is completely new, 120 new stars for Mario to collect in all new levels, all new story, new music. So to call it a mod, I think, is a little disingenuous. And I think the first one that I bought that I was really impressed with was this one right here, which is called Smash Brothers Remix. Now, we're talking about a Smash Brothers game that has not only all the original characters, but like 20 extra characters, and I think a total of like 79 levels on this cartridge. And I own the original Smash Brothers, but I can tell you, I don't think that thing's ever going back in my machine again because there is no point in playing it over this version. There's a few others that I want to show you as well that I really like. Just going to grab them here. They're a little out of order, but I've got these two Legend of Zeldas. I played only one of them, which is Dawn and Dusk. I played that one for a little bit. It's really cool. It's about these two kind of worlds that live in balance. One is perpetually light. One is perpetually in darkness. Link kind of needs to go through the middle, and there's some stuff going on there. Don't want to spoil the story. But I'm really impressed. And I think the last one I've got, I'm a huge James Bond fan. I've got this one, Goldfinger 64. It's just awesome. It tries to recreate all the classic places from that movie, recreates the classic Goldfinger music as best as you can. And like, look, plays perfectly on my original hardware N64. No issues with controls, no issues with stability as far as bugs in shit goes, but there is one big problem, or I should say concern. And on the off chance that I'm speaking to anyone who's going to try to develop an N64 homebrew, I would say be aware of Icarus syndrome, as I call it. You know, that classic story of Icarus with his wax wings flying too close to the sun and they melt. One issue I am seeing in these games is that the developers are really pushing the N64 hardware too far. I got to be honest. And I'll use Goldfinger as an example. It tries to recreate these expansive environments. There's one level that is a hotel, and I shit you not, the hotel is like 1-to-1 life size of like a Vegas hotel. You think I'm exaggerating? That mission took me like an hour and a half because you have to check every hotel room, and there's like, I'm not joking, there's like 300 hotel rooms in this hotel, a pool, a kitchen, a museum, and it just strains the hardware so much that I don't have like a device to tell the frames per second, but I gotta say, you're running sub like even 15 frames per second sometimes. Like, it is really chugging. I would say 10 to 12 FPS range. So that's my one concern, is that people are pushing this a little too hard. My advice would be, if you're a developer, just focus on smaller areas, do your new textures, your new music, but just make sure that it's optimized, that it runs and feels like a normal Nintendo 64 game. That said, I recommend at least those homebrews that I showed you. I'm sure there's many others. There's even they're starting to create brand new games. There's one called, I think it's Squidlet 64, which is going to be like a 4-person role-playing game. You've got your sorcerer, your fighter. It's going to be that 4-person split screen. They call it like Phantasy Star Online style. Now, I've never played Phantasy Star, but that's what it's described as. So really cool. And then as I was discussing with RGX what I wanted to monologue about, he brought up the Analogue N64 hardware system, which looks really cool. It's basically a N64 2.0, for the lack of a better term. And I mean, RGX, I don't know if you want to jump into it, but I mean, this thing is going to be like 4K, gonna like apparently mimics a CRT monitor, which is really important. And I just think it's the coolest thing.
I was actually reading about it and everything. So I went to their website and checked out what was going on. Because when you said Homebrews, I was like, I remember, something coming in the future. And then I was like, well, what is it? And then I looked it up and it was the Analogue. Now, Analogue is the same company that makes like the Analogue Pocket. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but that's like the, the Game Boy version of it. Just a really good, top quality FPGA, product. Just an amazing thing that they're just making nowadays. But the fact that it does FPGA, I mean, this thing, I forgot what chip. I read about the chip that they put into it, but just so amazing what they're doing with this. And the fact that it works with, they say, compatible with all of the N64 games. But is it going to be compatible with the Homebrews? That's kind of
that's a good question.
So it'll be interesting to see when this thing comes out, when people start putting the Homebrews in, if it's going to work. Because I know, like so say for instance the 2600 plus and the 7800 plus that's coming out. Well, I think they might have fixed it in the 7800 plus. But if you put in certain games like Pitfall, they don't work. And it's just simply because there's certain things in there that, like the custom chips that they had inside of the cartridges, they can't emulate. So, but with this system, seeing it's FPGA and not an emulator running on a chip, I'm pretty sure it's going to be able to run it. So just a really interesting product.
Yeah, and I got a question here. I mean, it's not specifically N64 related. It's kind of just more a philosophical question for Leland. And I don't know the answer to this. It's not a rhetorical question. Leland, like, if they ever expand homebrew culture somehow, say they figure out a way to do it for PS3, PS4, and they're creating new games. First of all, do you even have your old PlayStations? I don't know what you do with your old hardware, but if you still have it, would you consider buying homebrews for your older systems?
I still have my PS3 and my PS4, but no. Why would I? Why? Well, like what? I mean, it's an interesting question, but like I can't even think off the top of my head what game that would entice me to pick something like that up. I mean, essentially, all these, like you said off the bat, like they're just mods, and people mod PC games all the time, so it's not unusual that these exist. But the unusual part is that they exist in physical form, which is really cool.
Yeah,
but,
I mean,
I can't think of any like PS3 game. Well, obviously, the PS3 is a terrible era of Sony gaming to look back on, anyways. But even PS4, like I can run PS4 games on my PS5. So like maybe I would pick something up to play on my PS5. But if it's not, like, I mean, essentially you're getting these things bootleg, right? Like who's making these things?
I mean, they have different like groups that work on these together. You tend to have someone that's, really good with texture, someone that's really good with music, and they all come together and form like I don't want to call it a company, but just like a group of people working on these. But an example I would give you is like, you love God of War and you love Metal Gear Solid. What if someone made a homebrew of like Metal Gear Solid 4, but it's for the original hardware? I mean, I guess you're saying if it's backwards compatible, it should work on your PS5. But say it specifically had to work on your PS4. But it's like one of your favorite franchises, like a new Metal Gear or an expansion to Metal Gear Solid 4. Like, would that interest you or not really still?
MGS4 specifically, no. If somebody came out with
God of War,
I mean, honestly, no, I don't think I would.
Okay.
I don't know because
I don't want to be fishing here. Like, if your answer is no,
no,
it's
I
your
know,
thing, then that's fine.
and maybe like my initial reaction is no, don't touch my darlings, don't you dare kill my darlings. I think that's mostly what my reaction is right now, because I mean the original like trilogy of God of War, not to mention the reboot God of War and God of War Ragnarok, like they're phenomenal games. I don't know what somebody else would do to them to make them quote unquote better or improve them, in my eyes at least, from my perspective.
I don't really have an opinion on that other than to say that's a good point that you brought up, because I can see where that tension is. What I would ask RGX is, you said you're not big into the N64. Does the potential of this homebrew stuff, does that like excite you to maybe get a little more into it, or is it a non-factor?
Recently, I got that ED64, that flash cart for it. So I started playing some of the games, and I found some games on there. I'm just like, wow, these are actually halfway decent, and these are exclusives, And I'm like, it's not like just Mario characters; it's other things. And then when we started talking about the homebrews, I downloaded a couple different homebrews and stuff, but these weren't like what you have. I actually looked up trying to find some games like you have, and the funny thing is they all come from Canada, and I'm like, so the Canadians up there making all this homebrew stuff.
That's what we do, all living up in our igloos. Well, all we have time for is to make homebrew.
Now I kind of got this different perception about the N64. Now, if I didn't own one, this would be the time to go ahead and get that Analogue 3D, because really, if you think about it, so you got this thing that 100% accurately, so they claim, not emulates, but actually is, because it's FPGA N64 on this chip. So whether or not it will do or won't do homebrew, that's one thing. But I would definitely buy it just to see. Now, whether it would work with a flash cart too, that's another thing with these systems that they produce nowadays. It's almost like they make them so they won't work with flash carts, because they want you to buy the games and do that kind of stuff, so they can sell it as being legit. Because if it works with flash carts, then that's kind of promoting piracy, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just all those, all that craziness. But one of the things I do got to say that I like about this system is it has that 8-bit Do 64 controller that they're releasing with it. So it's that wireless Bluetooth controller that it looks like a really solid controller. I'm looking at a picture of it now, and they kind of got rid of the N64 design. It made it more, actually looks like an Xbox controller, more of the Xbox design, with the D-pad towards the bottom and the analog stick towards the top. But just a really cool design, and I might even pick that up to be a PC controller if it turns out to be quality. I'll wait till the reviews come out to see, but yeah, I mean, I might actually pick that up to be a PC controller.
What are they releasing games with this thing too? Because you mentioned, now is the time for you to get into the N64. But I think we talked about this last episode when we were talking about a chance for newer gamers to get into some of these older eras of gaming. But if there's no games coming out with it, then you got to root for the old original cartridges, and you're still potentially seeking something that isn't readily available. If I never owned an N64 and I want to have the chance to do it now, like, I get the system, great, but if I can't get the games, what's the point? So who is this for? Is this for younger generations to relive Nintendo's past, or is it like somebody like in Moby's? If Moby, your N64 ever craps out, I think you have a spare, but if you didn't and it, shit the bed, now you have a physical, a new 64 that you can get and still play all your old games. So who is this for?
I think the target market is for people that I would say the core target market is like Gen Zers, those people that are now heading to their late 20s. They maybe idolize 1990s, 1980s technology and retro gaming. They want something physical. this is something they can pick up and then collect those retro games. To answer one of your questions, it's N64 specific, but games, like old games, are actually readily available still on eBay. Like you can get loose cartridges for, $15, $20, $30, depends on the game. But it is still reasonable just because they made so many of these games. And
sure,
I'm certain,
you understand my point about it though is that it's still an additional step that a consumer needs to go. Like it's more. I think it's more of a step than going to your local game store and seeing what they have for N64 offerings. You know what I mean? Like it's another step removed is what it feels like for me for the consumer. So where's the other half of this coming from Analogue?
I personally don't know if I quite get your point on that one. Like how it's an extra step.
You can go, okay, great. You go and buy this Analogue N64 with no additional reprints of games support with it.
Right.
But now I have to go to an auxiliary site, an eBay site, some other type of shop site to then find games to use for this thing versus, taking a chance at maybe the same local game shop where you can pick up this. Or where are you going to be able to buy this straight from Analogue? Are you going to be able to go into a GameStop and find these things? And then also ask them, well, what do you have for old N64 games to offer in the shop? You know what I mean? Like, it still feels like there's a disconnect between having the physical console and then being able to actually have games to put into it and play on it.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. So I think what Leland's trying to get at is like when they release the plus versions of the 2600 and the 7800, they're releasing the games as well, along with all the peripherals that work with the old hardware. This is not. So it's releasing this nice new flashy Bluetooth controller, but it won't work with the actual N64, right? And it's not releasing any new games with it either. So, that type of thing. So I kind of understand where Leland's coming from on that. But and I definitely got to say, this is definitely something that's targeted towards Generation Z because like my son, I'll tell you this, the boy had bought a camcorder just because he wanted to get that nostalgic, pop the cassette out and all this type of thing. And he was so disappointed because he got it from a Goodwill and didn't work. And we went to another thrift shop and found one that did. And he was like the happiest kid on earth. He's like, and he's showing me these videotapes. I go to his dorm room or whatever in college. He's like showing me these videotapes he's taken. And I'm like, man, that's kind of cool. That reminds me of us back in the
90s. Totally. That is such a Gen Z story there. I love it. And I think it figures into that. So, okay, thank you, RGX. That helps me understand Leland's position a little better. I guess what I would say, the kind of person that's going to buy this Analogue is the kind of person that's going to enjoy hunting down these games. There's part of the fun in the hunt of trying to find these things at a reasonable price. I know because I am a retro video game collector, at least for Nintendo stuff from the 90s and later. And part of the fun is checking eBay and Amazon and Etsy and all these different sites, trying to see what's new, what's out there, trying to see if, there's a bargain, out there. I mean, it's not a video game per se, but like I was super happy last week. Transformers, the 1986 animated movie. Leland, there was a certain young lady who used to be part of our D&D group who I let borrow my 25th anniversary Transformers movie, which was valuable, and she just never brought that back and got married and disappeared from her life. So I wanted to get another copy, but this 30th anniversary is actually quite expensive, but I found one like half the going rate on eBay and got it. And there's that satisfaction of the hunt, the satisfaction of having got a deal. So retro video game collectors, I know you're saying it's an extra step, but I think a lot of them will enjoy that extra step of having to hunt down all these games.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense, but also like you're still not quite understanding what I'm saying is I'm not voicing that and vocalizing that as a complaint for that side of the target audience. I'm just saying if there is a chance of it targeting people that have never played an N64 before and have no idea which games are great for the N64, so they have nowhere to begin to hunt down these games, that's not going to appeal to that side of this a potential consumer audience. That was my overall point. So Again, I don't know if that's a negative or if it even matters, because if that's not what they give a shit about, making this and revitalizing the N64, then whatever, it is what it is.
I just think that would be a very small part of the market to have people that somehow find this Analog 64, like the idea of it, want it, but because the whole slot of games is not being reproduced with it, like Atari's doing, that they're like, oh, this is frustrating. I don't want it anymore. I just think that's a small sliver of the market, right? Like, if you don't know what the good games are for an N64, why would you try to look for an N64 hardware in the first place? If you literally don't know what any of the good games are and what you want to find and what you want to play, why would you want it?
Well, because our 88% of viewers of this show that aren't yet subscribed, which you should go ahead and click that button and ring the bell, are watching us talk about this and maybe we are garnering interest for those millions of viewers that have yet to subscribe. So that's my point, is what I mean. Like, people talk about these people, word of mouth spreads about these things. And I don't think it's unrealistic to think that that type of target audience is now being targeted by people speaking about this stuff. So that just was my overall point.
No, I get your point, especially when you say word of mouth. You might get someone who's like casually interested and it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to hunt down all these games off eBay. You know, it sounds cool. See it at their friend's place. Oh, how do you get games? You have to buy them all online and pay $20 each shipping. So yeah, I could see how that could potentially be a turnoff.
Well, so I have another question for then both of you. This versus the Atari 7800 thing that we talked about last episode, which is lower effort, the Analog N64 or the Atari? Because it really feels like the Analog 64 is the bottom barrel of effort to be put into revitalize this old system. Because, like RGX so kindly and eloquently put, to wrap around my point here, is like all you're getting is a system and nothing else that helps you utilize the system. So where's the low effort here? This seems like low-hanging fruit that's getting plucked to me.
Well, what I'm thinking, man, so what it comes down to is the marketing. So Atari is getting the marketing completely right. So whoever bought Atari now, I forgot who it was, but Atari's been through so many owners over the past, 20, 30 years. It's been ridiculous. But whoever's got it now is doing it right. The marketing is perfectly there. So they are targeting not only the Gen Xers, but they're targeting the millennials, they're targeting the Gen Zers, because it's that physical copy thing. Now, as far as the technology goes, that's basically an emulator on a chip is what it is. Okay, it's the Stella emulator on a chip. Okay, and so it's like the Nintendo on a chip, same thing. All those little clone consoles you see out there, those little tiny things you buy at flea markets and stuff, that's Nintendo on a chip, same thing. But with the Analog, that's actually, they have reversed engineered the N64 and basically put it onto a chip themselves. It's all programmed FPGA that does that. And that, I think, is a little bit more effort going into it. So Atari went the marketing route, which is kind of funny because that's what Atari did back in the day, and that's what made them successful. While Analog is going, okay, well, we did it the right way. Let's see what we can get, but we're not going to offer anything else besides this controller.
Yeah,
right.
That's my opinion.
Okay. No, I thank you. I didn't. I mean, that honestly does really make the difference as far as gauging what is the biggest shill for a product of these two. You know what I mean? So that's interesting. I mean, maybe once Analog sees that this garners a bunch of success, then I mean, who knows what the follow up from them too is going to be, right? Or what capabilities they have to follow up a huge success in this console sale.
I think the magic middle for this would have been part of the fun part about getting one of those 90s consoles or even 80s consoles, you usually had a tie-in game, like one game that came with it. It would have been awesome if Analogue had some sort of deal with one of even these homebrewers. So that, like, one of the more popular homebrewers, like, say, Smash Remix. Like, Smash Brothers is one of the most popular N64 games. If you could have included Smash Remix as a tie-in, I think that would have enhanced the marketing and would have given you something extra than just the hardware plus one controller. So maybe that's what they should have considered.
I mean, if they're trying to target Gen Z, I really think they should have really packed in. Well, I don't know, because then they would have to made a deal with Nintendo to pack in something that was a Nintendo exclusive with Nintendo characters. And I don't think they want to go that route because hardware is different. So you got software. The software is copyrighted and trademarked. But the hardware, after so much time, you can, develop it and make things different to be able to curb the copyright and trademark infringement. Whereas with software, you can't. So they would actually have to see, that's the difference. Atari actually owns Atari and the trademark and the copyright, whereas Analogue just doesn't. So.
That's a great point, but I think one thing they could have done, and now I take back what I said because you're totally right about the copyright, but I did mention they're making like from scratch, not copyrighted brand new games now. I mentioned Squidlet 64. Now, had they packaged one of those in, then there would be no copyright issue. But like, I get it. I don't think there's too many of them out there right now. Maybe the logistics of that are too difficult. They wanted to release before Christmas, 2024, or well, I guess they're releasing early 2025, but maybe it wasn't feasible. But it was just an idea for what could have been that magic middle there. So
yeah, I could only imagine how difficult it was trying to work around Nintendo as well, because Nintendo is notorious for taking people to court and suing them over their intellectual property. All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and bring up some changes to the show as well. So as you guys know, this is the Retro Gaming Rewind. But starting at the beginning of the new year, we're actually going to put this on its own channel. So we'll have one more episode on this channel. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and put it on its own. Now, with that being said, what we're going to go ahead and do is kind of change up the format as well. So it's not just going to be about retro gaming, but it's going to be about everything pop culture. So we're going to be talking about movies. We're going to be talking about music. We'll be talking about D&D, magic, everything else, that kind of thing. So here's a little example, because we were bantering today about what we were going to do about the new episodes coming up. So here's a little example of what you guys are going to be seeing in the future.
That we kind of wanted to be able to discuss other topics besides specifically retro gaming. And I know that's, the foundation of where this show began. I'm sure it's going to come up as a fairly regular topic, but we want to discuss movies and streaming and other parts of pop culture and just not be limited. It's funny. There's a bunch. I watch YouTube more than any other streaming. Like I tell people I would give up my Netflix, my Crave, which is a Canadian thing, just to keep YouTube premium, which is what I've had for years and years. And what I've noticed is like the channels that I like that have very specific themes, after a few years, they start to get in trouble finding stuff to talk about. And I see these community posts asking fans, like, I'm running out of video ideas. What do you do? And then there's this one guy I follow. It's got a few million subscribers. It's a pretty big channel called The History Guy. And like his theme is all of history. Like the guy can do like history of almond farming and then jump to like naval history, and like that dude is never going to run out of topics as long as he has breath in his lungs. And
I'm sub to him, I ain't gonna lie.
You're sub to him. Yeah, there we go. Lance, he's good. And so that makes me, it's going to be cool for us to be able to open up, these topics. And I think one of the strengths we have is cross-generational. I mean, Leland and I are millennials. You're Gen X, which we love. I'm sure we're probably going to get Gen Z, guest hosts on at some point. And I find a lot of our discussions go cross-generational. Even today, you look at the monologue, lots of talk about cross-generations. So yeah, it's just going to be cool to open it up beyond specifically retro gaming. I'm hoping we can incorporate more anecdotes too. I mean, I mentioned D&D at one point that woman who was once part of our group, and we don't really have contact with her anymore. But like, I've got some hilarious D&D stories from sessions I've had with Leland before. I mean, I could do a show just yeah. Don't include children NPCs in a D&D game with Leland. Doesn't end well. That's what I'm gonna say. Especially when he's a dragonborn character, and he's got his fire breath, and the kids are in the way of a goal. So it can get quite disturbing, actually. But
let me tell you about the last D&D game I was involved with, dude. So like this was back in like the 90s, right? So me, my roommate, which I kind of grew up with, he lived like right down the street from me, neighbor kid. And so we had got this apartment together, yada, yada, yada. And he started hosting D&D games. And I was like, man, I like D&D, but I'm not going to sit here, because I was like the party guy. So I'd go out and party. I'd come back, they're still playing D&D. And I'm like, all right, man, I'm going to sit down with you guys. So we sat down. These fools were smoking so much weed, I literally passed out at the table.
That's hilarious. Already had to carry you unconscious. It's funny. We're going to Ghost Marty is what we call him, our ex co-host. We were at his stag, and this was like 10 years ago, doing a D&D game over a weekend. And I tell you, the party got split. There was me and another guy who were like absolutely refusing so much to go down this one path that the other two guys wanted to go down, that Leland he was being DM. He had to split up the group. And there was a Saturday, which was like, it was a weekend thing. Saturday was the main day. We went home Sunday afternoon. For like 7 hours, it was nice. It was the summertime. So it was me and this other guy. His name was also Mike. We would go onto the patio. We would talk. We would play magic cards. We'd do chess. Well, Leland's doing the session with the other guys, because we weren't supposed to know what they were doing then, right? It's like, if the party split, got to go in different directions. Then we'd switch spots. Those two guys would have to go to the patio. Me and Mike had to go inside, play our side with Leland. So yeah, that was a good memory.
Yeah. Oh god, that was so fun. We were all drinking. It was like 12 hours of D&D. I was like in my element. I absolutely love when the party splits. Always split the party is what I say. Always, you hear, don't never split the party. No, split them up. Personally, when I'm running the game, I fucking love that, because I love the juggling of timelines, and I love how they interweave with each other. Oh man, it's just like, I love it when the party splits. Like, I'll encourage it.
I'm glad you like that, man, because I think that would have annoyed, certain DMs. I mean, we played before with certain people that are very rigid in how they want their game to run. Like, nothing creative, no jokes. Like, we had this one guy, I'm not going to mention his name, but he wanted like everything to be like serious, let's fight the sorcerer dark lord of Urn, and like never crack a smile, and like everything is min-maxing our stats. But it's like, I guess it's like, to bring it back to this show, it's like the chemistry that you've got in D&D has to match the chemistry of the people that you're doing it with.
If you guys were around, like if we lived next to each other, and like instead of like 1,000 miles apart, yeah, dude, I would definitely be playing D&D with you guys. But Have you guys played Magic too? You guys are into Magic?
Oh yeah, Leland and I are big into Magic. Yeah. I've been talking a lot, Leland. I mean, I'll if you want to tell him about the arms race and how our Magic works.
Sure. I mean, anybody that's a fan of the t-hud podcast certainly heard us wax poetical about this, but Moby and I go through ebbs and flows of playing, spurts of playing, and then long periods of not playing. And in those spurts of playing, it's always, hey, I just ordered this new playset. And then one of us will go, well, you ordering new weaponry. I need new weapons. And then it just bounces back and forth, and we're ordering like hundreds of dollars worth of cards to build into these decks that we, I mean, personally, I always run, I always have like literally 12 decks that are always built and rotating and changing. So I always have a myriad of choice whenever Moby and I get together to play, and mainly because I don't know if it's like ADHD in my deck building, but I just love having a slew of different things to just grab and always have. And but that means though, when if there's overlap cards that I want to have in more than one deck, I have to have multiple play sets for each deck, which is just stupid. Because why wouldn't I just switch them between decks when I go to play instead of this one? Okay, I got to take these 4 cards out, put them into this one. Yeah. The arms races get expensive for sure.
Yeah, Leland. There's a saying amongst the First Nations people up here in Canada. I don't know if the saying is the same down in the U.S. Potlatching. It's like where someone gets enough wealth, they are then expected to share that wealth with the village. Well, Leland, twice by my count, he's probably done it more than twice, has potlatched out a lot of his best cards, usually to me, sometimes to other people we used to play, and like given me like his best dragons and like these really cool cards. And like not like 1 or 2, like entire play sets. And then he wants to get back into Magic, and suddenly he's sad because he's missing all of his dragons or whatever else he's given me, angels or whatnot. And it's almost like a weird cycle because then, like, for example, for his last birthday, I bought him a bunch of cards that he had given me. Like, I want to keep those dragons, don't get me wrong. But I bought him some of his dragons to give back to him, which I'm sure he'll get back to me at some point. So then I'll have like 8 of all these different dragons.
Yeah. I mean, I've been playing Magic since like 1994. Like, since I was a wee young boy in the early stages of Magic. I missed the Alpha and Beta era, but kind of stepped into like Portal Second Age and like the days of like Armageddon all the lands away and all this bullshit stuff. Back when the power curve was like at the bottom of this arc that it now seems to form, right? And so I've been in and out of Magic like probably 6 or 7 different times over the decades, over the 30 years now, I guess, or 20 years or whatever. Yeah, you just got to give them away and then you just buy them all up again. It's the stupidest way to collect something, but that's the way I do it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I got this full shoebox downstairs in the garage, a whole like Nike Jordan shoebox full of just Magic cards that I had from back in the 90s. Like I said, I haven't played since like D&D and Magic. I haven't played since the 90s. I just haven't found anybody. I live in Hickstick land, guys, where I got literally a cow patty out. I could look out my window and see cow patties. Ain't nobody playing Magic and D&D out here, man. But yeah, what do you do, dude?
I don't know, RGX, you got to check some of those rares in that shoebox because some of these Magic cards from the 90s, like the prices are insane if you didn't know.
Yeah? Really?
You might have some whoppers of value in that box. Absolutely. I remember being in high school and there was a card shop close to Moby and I called the Collector's Den. And every Friday night they would have like a Friday night Magic. And then I would get dropped off there and with $20 in my pocket, which means I could get a booster pack and Little Caesars pizza because it was all in this little wall. And if I didn't get the pizza, I could get 2 booster packs. And I'll tell you, more often than not, I forewent the pizza and got the second booster pack for sure.
Yeah, it's my Magic story from the beginning. I didn't play until fall of 2003. I remember specifically when I got into it very clearly. But I remember being in grade school in 1994, and there's this kid. I know he doesn't watch the show. His name's Dean. And he showed me his binder because he was getting really into it. And in the front of his binder, because he focused on it so much, he had 5 mint condition Black Lotus cards. And he was talking about like how good they are in the game. And at the time, it was just, really good card from the alpha or beta. I forget if it was alpha or beta. But I remember he had 5 distinctly. Like I can see them in my mind. And those are like well over $100,000 US each now per card. If he still had those. And I wonder what he did with them because that guy could, buy a house or whatever, buy a condo now with selling those cards. Easy. If he still had them. So, it's interesting too. Like I've got, I just kept my Pokemon collection from the late 90s, like the original Pokemon cards. I got a bunch of shinies and rares from the original set. Unfortunately, no first editions, but even the ones that I've got, a lot of them are like $100 each or close to it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Collecting is definitely something we're going to have to discuss on this show in a a bunch of different ways. And I mean, if you're watching this, I know we've kind of gone on tangents, but I think that's what we hope for the new version of the show, the evolution, is that we're going to be able to discuss more of these topics where the three of us overlap, but are not necessarily retro gaming specific.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show and the Retro Rewind. Once again, this is RGX saying goodbye to y'all.
I'm Leland Steele, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Our collective self-worth is directly tied to the number of subscribers. So you have to click the button for us to be, feel good about ourselves. So please, ring our bell.
I'm Moby. I hope you enjoyed the discussion today, the bantering and the monologue, and we'll see you again next month.